Hello and welcome to this series on recreating Baldur's Gate 3's camera system inside Unreal Engine. Throughout this series we are going to be building this camera system from the ground up, meaning we are starting right from the start with Unreal's enhanced input system and controlling the camera through Blueprint. From there we're going to shift our focus onto the environment and materials and being able to create holes in the environment to be able to see the character and keep them inside at all times. In doing so, we're going to dive into loads of different functionality inside Unreal you might not have before, and anything you learn in this series will definitely help you down the line with other systems you're creating. So with that in mind, there are, as with anything in game dev, 1,000 different ways to do anything. This is only my solution. If you have any other ideas or improvements to anything I'm doing here, please feel free to dive in and do that yourself. That is the best way to learn, is just by doing. So with that in mind, let's get started. Let's dive into Unreal Engine. Hello, so here we are in Unreal Engine. We're going to get started trying to actually replicate the camera from Baldur's Gate 3 in Unreal Engine. I'm working in 5.3 here, and I'm using the third-person template. However, you'll notice that this isn't the standard third-person template map. Basically, all I've done here is I've set up another level with the default lighting and a landscape so that we've got just some varying height levels that we can use to kind of test how the camera navigates different levels of terrain alongside the character. So let's get started on things. This first episode, we're going to focus on just getting the base project classes and player input set up, and then we're going to move on to some of the more fun things like the materials that's going to allow you to see through the world. But let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the content folder, and we're going to make a new folder here called game. And I suppose you don't have to do this step. I'm going to create new game modes and controller classes. That's just because I like to work from a ground up level, but if you want to work with the standard game mode and controller class that already comes as default, feel free to do that. I think that is the just player controller and game mode base. What is it? Game mode base, probably. Anyway, so I'm going to make those real quick. So if we go blueprint class, game mode base, we're going to call this like BG3 game mode. I'm going to do the same thing for the controller. Blueprint class, and I'm going to go player controller. BG3 underscore player controller. Cool. So we can now load up the game mode. We're actually going to use the base character class that comes with the third-person template just because it's already got a lot of animations and skeletal stuff set up that would kind of take a bit longer to replicate, so we're going to skip past that and use the default one. So we can see the default pawn class here with the new game mode open. We're going to change that from the default pawn to the BP third-person character, and the player controller class to BG3 player controller. If I was setting this up for an actual project, I might make more classes for the game modes, such as the game state and the game instance, but for this tutorial, this is all we really need to do. So I'm going to compile and save that, shut that down, and then in the Blueprint tab up in the top bar, we're going to make the project default game mode to that one we just made. So we can go project settings, game mode, and then select game mode base class is going to be BG3 game mode. Cool. If we hit play now, we should see no difference in the character. We do see a difference because we're not able to move around, because I was messing with this earlier and just disconnected this, which we will be doing, but for now you should have a result that just looks like this. The character can move around just as if you made a fresh third-person template project, and yeah, you should be able to move around. So the first thing that we're going to do, as I mentioned, is set up input. Now, obviously, Baldur's Gate 3 does not control like your standard third-person movement. You know, if I'm using WASD here to move this character, what we want to set up is point-and-click kind of movement. So the character moves to whatever point you want to move to. And to do that, we are going to go to the content browser again. You could set this up in the third-person input folder but I'm going to make a new one here just to separate it out from the template stuff. So we can go new folder, input, and if you haven't used the new enhanced input system from UE5, it is very nice. It is very streamlined. It's a lot more robust and with a lot more features than the previous deprecated UE4 system. I'm only really getting into it to begin with now, so I don't have the best experience with it, or I don't have the most knowledge with this system just yet. But from what I've been playing around with, it's been an absolute pleasure. So we're going to continue with this. What we're going to need for this enhanced input system is, if we hover over input here, we're going to need a set of input actions as well as an input mapping context. So these input actions are going to be the individual buttons and events that we're going to have trigger in blueprints. And the input mapping context is going to basically wrap all of those actions into one, I suppose, mapping context, which just means it allows the character or the controller to use whatever set of actions are in that mapping. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new folder, and we're going to separate the actions out. So we can do input actions. And in this folder as well, we're going to make an input mapping context. And we're going to call this IMC for input mapping context underscore, what do we want to call this? BG3 camera. I'm going to make that G capitalized. Cool. Now we need to decide what kind of actions we want for that mapping context. Let's get some of these input actions set up. We can go input, input action, and do IA for input action, move camera. We're going to Control D, duplicate that out, and do the same thing for zoom camera. Same again for rotate camera. And then again for, let's see, lock camera to character. What else do we need? Your player movement. So we're going to do another one. Input action, IA underscore, what do we want to call this? Left clicking is kind of used as a very generic event. You know, if you left click on an item, you might interact with that item rather than necessarily moving the character there. So we're going to call this IA underscore select. Let's be quite generic for it. We can change that later if we want to. And what else? The orthographic camera, we said. Input action, IA underscore switch camera. And lastly, we're going to do something a little different, which is our IA underscore rotate camera gate. So the reason why we've got the rotate camera and the rotate camera gate is the gate is going to control whether or not you've got the middle mouse button actually clicked in. Because obviously in Baldur's Gate you can only rotate the camera if you've got that middle mouse button clicked in before you move the mouse around, else it's not going to do anything. So we've got those input actions. We can go File, choose Files to save, and then just make sure everything we've just done is saved. Cool. Now we can add those actions to the input mapping context we created earlier. And we'll do that one at a time. Click on the plus, go to the mapping, and we've got some of the defaults there from the third-person templates project, but we are not going to be implementing them. We're going to go down to move camera, add another one for rotate camera, add another one for lock camera to character, and another for switch camera, zoom camera, and are we missing one? The rotation gate, right? Rotate camera gate. So we can add the last one, which is IA underscore select. Cool. Now we need to set up what keys those are going to use. So move camera, we are going to want what is basically already in the move action in the default mapping. So we're going to just go and copy that. If you load up content third person input IMC default, it's got a few settings in there that we're going to want to copy. So we've got WASD. We're not going to bother with up, down, left, right, or the gamepad, but if you want to implement those yourself, go straight ahead. What we're going to do is we're going to do W, and it has a modifier on it, which is swizzle input axis values. And we're going to do the same for this. So add W, and we're going to add all 4 of those. So W, A, if you click on that keyboard icon, it's going to turn yellow, and if you click the key on the keyboard, it's going to choose that key that you press automatically. It's much nicer than having to go through the keyboard this keyboard and trying to find the right key that you want much quicker. So what did we have? W had swizzle input axis, right? And we are swizzling YXC. So what this does is it basically says take that action and map it to either the Y-axis, the X-axis, or the Z-axis. I think, what does this do? Swaps X and Y-axis. So this is going to move it to the Y-axis, I think is forward. Whatever this one is anyway, we can double check. Cool, so there's that. A is going to be, third one down there, modifiers negate. Negate just means do the opposite. So if D is forward, is positive, then A is backwards. So this is differentiating right from left. So D, I don't think we need anything, but S is going to need both of those. We're going to need the swizzle input axis as well as negate. And we can save that. Next we have the rotate camera, and we want that to be on the mouse axis. So we can't use the key select there. We'll have to select in the standard menu. So we select that, go to mouse, and we will do mouse X, I believe, for left and right. And then lock camera to character. We're going to use, we can really use anything. This isn't a key we use in Baldur's Gate, so I'm going to just do spacebar for now. We might change that later. Switch camera, I'm going to do O for orthographic. Zoom camera is going to be the middle mouse button wheel, so we're going to do mouse wheel axis. Rotate camera gate is going to be middle mouse button. And IA select is simply going to be, we can actually use the keyboard for that, left click. And save. The other thing we want to do with these input actions is determine what kind of action they are. So if we go back into the actions, oh, wrong folder, content, input actions, here we are. We need to choose what kind of input those are. So lock camera to character is a bool because we only want to trigger, or it's kind of triggering an event. We only need that like that. Move camera, on the other hand, we're going to swap the value type from bool out to vector 2D, axis 2D. So this is going to allow this one action to control forward, backwards, left, and right, which is much nicer than the old UE4 way of doing this. What else do we have? Rotate camera, which is a 1D, which is axis 1D, which is a float, because we want to know if we're rotating it left or right. And we have gate is a bool. By default, it's that already. Select is a bool. Switch camera is a bool. And zoom camera, we want to load that up and make that a float as well. Cool. And the last thing we're going to do for this episode is we're going to quickly actually make the camera class. So if we go out here, we're going to make a new folder in the content browser called camera. And we're going to load that up. And we are going to make a new blueprint class. And it's going to be a standard actor. And we're going to call this bg3_camera. So this is going to be the camera that is separated out from the character or the controller. We want to be controlling this separately, and we'll go through why exactly that is in later episodes. But nice, that is episode 1 done. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode where we're actually going to get into some fun camera movement and character movement. So yeah, I'll see you there.